Today we're going to be sharing with you tips for assembling your MechMaxx SM-26 Sawmill. Your mill will arrive in a crate that weighs about 850 pounds. The freight company that delivered my mill was able to use a lift gate to drop the crate down and put it right inside my garage for me. So the first thing that I did was break open the crate and start unwrapping and unpacking all of the pieces that were inside of the crate. You're going to assemble the mill bed first, so I laid the rails out in the floor in the configuration that they would be put together. That way all the pieces were there ready to go. Your assembly instructions will be inside of a plastic container that's attached to the back of the mill head. Now, in addition to this video and your paper instructions, you can also find a MechMaxx assembly video where they take you step by step through the assembly process without any commentary. Now, I'm sharing with you a time lapse running in the background, but we'll slow down and we'll show you step by step some of the most difficult parts of the process in this video. After I laid out all of the parts, my assembly time was only about 3 hours, so this is not a very difficult assembly, but there are a few little tricky parts. So hopefully this video will assist you in easily assembling your mill. But if you have any questions, jump down in the comments and ask me, and I'll do my best to help you out. And stay tuned till the end. We'll share a few extra tips. Well, hey there, hobby homesteaders. Welcome back to Peek's Peak. If you've been following the channel for the last couple of months, you probably know what I have laid out on the floor here, ready to assemble. We've got an exciting new partner with Peek's Peak Hobby Homestead, and that is MechMaxx. MechMaxx is a new entry into the sawmill industry. They make tractor implements, skid steer implements, and quite a few other products. I was searching for a mill option and I came across their 26-inch sawmill. I was really intrigued by it because it is the most affordable mill on the market. So I'm going to share with you the assembly of the MechMaxx SM-26 Sawmill. And what we're going to do is we're going to assemble it here on the shop because we've got a concrete floor that's level. So I'm going to assemble it here in the shop. When I have it assembled, then I can use my lift to raise it up in the air and I can back my trailer under it because we're going to put it up there in the wood yard that you saw me get started on. And I've still got to build the foundation platform and everything for it. So we're not quite ready to build it on site. Since I have the lift here, I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to use it. I can assemble it in here. And what we're going to do is get it put together and then we'll do a test mill of, I've got a small walnut log, and we'll do a test milling and get everything tuned in and adjusted and working right in here. And then we can move it up to the wood yard and get it set up in its permanent location. But today's video is going to be about the assembly, and I'll share with you the things that I learned as we assemble this, hopefully give some tips and tricks for those of you who have purchased an SM-26 from MechMaxx, and we can all kind of go on this journey together. So the first thing I'm doing with these is, before I put them on, is going through and tightening up this base because they've got the nuts on here, but they're not snugged down tight, and I don't want that little wiggle space there. So I'm just throwing a wrench on them and snugging those up. And then going down through here, and there's really only one hole that these will fit in these rails. So I'm going down through here and placing these on here. And I'm pretty well just tightening them to where the stud of the bolt comes to the top of the nut for right now. So I'm setting the sawmill kind of at the highest level as a starting point, and the main reason for that for me is so that I'll be able to get the arms of the lift underneath the rails when I'm ready to lift it up. There's no need to go crazy tight on these just yet because we're going to be adjusting the feet to level the mill out. When I started assembling this, I started using my impact, and then I remembered you're really not supposed to use an impact on nylock nuts because the speed and friction will cause them to fail. So I opted against that, but one other really good reason to use a regular ratchet is because you kind of need to take your time and make sure that as you tighten these down, you keep everything squared up and your rails fit together nice and flush. So I kind of revisited that plan there just a little bit. lift is completely unnecessary for this assembly, but I decided why bend over when I can raise it up in the air and stand up. Okay, so we're to our first do as I say, not as I do. We gotta go back and loosen these up because I've got the rails too close together and these log stop bars won't go in there. Okay, so we wanna make sure we put those bars in there before you tighten down all of your bunks. Lesson learned. Okay, now we can go down through here and we can tighten everything up. We can tighten up those log stops and the locks and all that. So. Frame of reference, it took me about 45 minutes to put together the bed, and that was having to take some things back apart, loosen them up, and rearrange things to get them exactly right. So all in all, pretty simple to put the bed together. Next, we're going to be putting together the power head. When you go to put your round tube in, you've got to spread this apart so that it goes through this clamp here. Line that up, and then line up with the hole on top. And on this one, of course it's round, so it doesn't matter. You can spin it any direction. But on this one, on the square tube, you won't be able to spin it once you get it in there. So you gotta take the one with the two round holes and put it at the bottom, and then slide it through, and you're gonna point them outward or inward. Okay, now on this part, it's pretty important to lay everything out and find the right bolts, because you have some bolts that are the same size, same thread, but they're shorter. You only have 2 of those, so you want to find the 4 matching. So we're going to take this and line it up on here, if we can. I was going to try to use that handle to help me support this, but I don't know. Get a bolt through there. And we put this plate on there like so, a flat washer, and one of the nylock nuts. Get our next one. Flat washer, and nylock nut. On these, you're gonna need a 19 millimeter for the socket, or for the nut, and an 18 for the bolt. All right, now this is not a one-man job, but I work alone a lot. So what I've done is put jack stands under these legs so that I can raise them up, because what I want to do is release these locks and let the head down to the bottom so that the weight is not up at the top here. Okay, now we lock her back. Now, I think I can stand this up. Man, look at that. All right, now we got her standing up. We can finish putting the rest together. Harbor Freight jack stands to the rescue. All right, this next crossbar is going to have a little plate that you're going to put 2 bolts through, and then it has threads made into it on the square side. So put this over the round tubing. flat washer, split washer, or lock washer I call them. And a nut, flat washer, split washer, and a nut. Okay, so you have one short bolt and a nylock nut that you can reach down in here and put through that. Then you got these bolts here, and I'm not tightening anything up yet because I want to be able to move everything around. That's actually a mistake I made early on putting the bed together, because I started tightening everything down when it clearly says in the instructions, don't tighten everything down until you get it all in place and leveled out. And you set the mill head on the tracks and roll them forward and back, because I'm certain that my width of my tracks are not set correctly yet. So I'm going to be working on that. All right, so you got these 13 millimeter head, they're 8 millimeter bolts, but 13 millimeter wrench fits them. And you put those on here and start pulling this round clamp together. Let me move you around here so you can see it. And as this clamp closes up, then it'll pull this bracket down into position. Flat washer, split washer, and nut. Okay, so a real quick rundown. You start with this top plate with the bolts that thread into it through the square tubing side, because you have the round side open to just slide down on here and kind of hold it in position near to where it goes while you put everything else in place. Once you get that in, then you actually need to take this bracket right here that has the L shape and start clamping this. You'll get your bolt in the side here to set the level. This is the short bolt with the nylock nut. And then you put these longer, smaller bolts, I don't remember what size they were, but anyway, with a nylock nut on this clamp through the L bracket here and start clamping that together. And as you do, then these bolt holes will start to line up so that you can get both a plate on each side of this. That's about the only kind of tricky thing about this part, just getting the order of assembly correct on that. We got that taken care of. I think I got all the bolts tight. Okay, now put our basket on there, and as usual, a flat washer, split washer, flat washer, split washer, and a nut. Boy, I feel like it's starting to look like a sawmill. So we'll just run it up here. Okay, now we got to route some cables. Whew, man, we are looking like a sawmill, looking like a sawmill. There actually weren't any split washers on these bolts, but there's a lot of vibration in all of this, so I want split washers or lock nuts on everything. So I grabbed some extras out of my bolt box so I could take care of that. Now I just stuck this arm on here, but I'll move it up higher later because it's definitely too low. So these have numbers on them, 1, 2, and 3. Now, of supreme importance, they ship these engines with no oil in them. So you have to fill them up with 10W30 oil before you start it. We're not ready to start anyway, but just know there's no oil in the engine. All right, they look like they're about the same size. So I think this one hooks on the far side, goes on the top pulley, and then over this far side here and down to there, which means I've got to pick up the mill. This one goes on the near side, bottom pulley, over, over, right in there. That's the one. Let her back down. Watch our cables tighten up. Boom dog. That's what I'm talking about. All right, guys. Well, now we're ready to try to get this thing sat on the rails. This is gonna be a trip. Okay, I'm gonna let the rails down on the ground. All right. I have no idea if I can pick this up. I took the bucket off, so so far, so good. All right, now, hydraulics are topped out. We can come on a couple more inches anyway. Made for it, son. We have a sawmill. I am super excited about this MechMaxx SM-26 sawmill. I assembled this sawmill in really probably under 3 hours, but I'm gonna call it 3 hours. I spent about 45 minutes assembling the bed last night, and then about 2 hours assembling the head, but I also had to unbox it and lay out everything and, you know, study the instructions and all that. So I spent some extra time on that stuff in preparation so I would know what I was doing. I watched the video that MechMaxx put on YouTube that it's no explanation, it's just a video that you can watch to kind of see the general order of operations when you're putting everything together. Those were all very helpful. Now I will tell you, I have some adjusting to do. I'm not ready to throw a log on this and start milling yet, but I am going to get everything tuned in, make sure my bunks are level, and make sure my rails are true, and all of the wheels are touching on the rails all the way back and forth, and everything's the way that it's supposed to be. And then I'm gonna bring a log in here and we'll do a test run. That's gonna be on another video. Today was just about installation tips. So let's talk about a few of the things that I encountered when I was assembling this. Really and truly, the assembly of this MechMaxx SM-26 was not nearly as complicated as I was expecting. You know, I'd heard stories of it taking 2 guys an 8-hour day to assemble a sawmill. And, you know, there's all kinds of different options out there in terms of sawmills. So that leads to part of that. You know, a lot of guys get a trailer with their sawmill and they have to assemble that as well. So, you know, I just had all these ideas in my head that this was going to take me a couple of weeks. And I literally came out for an hour last night and unboxed everything, laid it out, spent 45 minutes putting the rails together. And then today I came out and I spent about 2 hours assembling the head, set it on the mill, and we're assembled. Now, I have spent the last hour making tweaks and adjustments to the setup. I got my rails good, actually just by luck, so I didn't even have to loosen those up. They track good and straight, I had them level. I think partially the way that this is designed gets your track width where it's supposed to be because of the log dogs and the way that they mount in there. But regardless, I would suggest snugging your bolts down but not tightening them until you get your mill head set on the bed. That way you can make adjustments to the width of the track and get those lined up really good. But my mill tracks really well, and so all of that seemed to work out well. The next suggestion that I would make is, of course, get yourself, I don't know if you saw my oil change tub that I had, but what I did was with each step, I ripped open the bag of bolts and dumped them out in that tray, and I kept the tools that fit those bolts in that tray and carried it around with me while I worked so that I had the right size wrenches. And initially I started to use my impact because, you know, it makes things a whole lot faster. But you have a lot of locking nylon nuts, and those you can kind of melt that nylon and then it causes it to not work the way that it's supposed to. A couple of things that kind of confused me about it was the configuration of these bunks. You have a couple of bunks that do not have a slot for the log stops in them, and those go at the one end and the other end. And basically, I was watching the assembly video and it looked like they put one of the bunks in the inside set of the two sets of holes here on the end. What I noticed is in the instructions, it showed you using the outside set of holes. And so what I decided was on the end down there by the mill head, I would go ahead and move it to the outside set of holes. And I just left this one on the inside set of holes down here. You can't push the mill head all the way to this last bunk anyway, so it really doesn't matter which holes you use. The one thing I ran into was when I was trying to put in my log dogs, those bars, I couldn't fit them between the tracks because I had tightened things down prematurely. And once I loosened them up and fit those in there, well, that got my track width where it was supposed to be, and all that worked out really well. I did this by myself, but I used my tractor some. I used the tractor to take the assembly with the motor. It wasn't the whole mill head yet, but you know, the part with the blade and the pulleys and all that is stood up inside of your crate. I could pick it up, but it was gonna hurt me to try to move it on my own. So I used my tractor, and there's not a really good way to attach to it, and where I hooked to it with a chain, I didn't have the weight centered, and it flipped over, and it's no big deal, but I dented my fuel tank just a little bit with the bucket of the tractor by doing that. So if I had had a second person here to help me keep that stuff organized, it would have been smarter and I could have taken better care of it. But overall, everything arrived in great shape. I had all the hardware and everything that I needed to assemble it. No surprises, except I'm pleasantly surprised with the overall fit, finish, and quality of this mill. I looked at the prices on the mills that are on the market right now, and this is by far the most affordable 26-inch mill option that's out there, by almost $800. You know I'm familiar with the Woodland Mills HM130 Max. Well, that's kind of the Woodland Mills' top level mill. So I was expecting to be a little bit disappointed in what I receive here because, you know, you're not comparing apples to apples, and that Woodland Mills HM130 Max is a lot more expensive. So the fact that the mill that I am familiar with was substantially more expensive than this, I fully expected to be disappointed about a few things and assume that the quality might be lower, the strength of the materials and things like that would be less, but I'll be honest, everything is very familiar. The rails of this seem like the identical rails that HM130 Max uses. The bunks seem like the same material, same thickness. A lot of the mechanisms and the things that are used are very familiar to me from that HM130 Max. So overall, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing for the money out of this mill. There are a couple of features that this does not have that the HM130 had. For instance, when you pull the throttle, it doesn't turn on your water. You have to turn on the valve for your water. It's an extra step while you're milling. That's something that probably I'm not going to like a lot, and I may get me something to set up an automatic waterer, but it works and it will get me milling, so that's no big deal. The only other thing that I could think of that might be nice to see on this mill would be in the blade tensioner. You just have a T-handle. You do not have a slot for a torque wrench. And You know, my buddy Justin, he carried a torque wrench with him, and he set it to 20, 25 foot-pounds every time so that he had the same blade tension every time. And I like that idea. Here, you're kind of going by feel. I don't know. I may find that it works just fine that way, but it doesn't have the slot for a torque wrench. So even though it says on the mill, the torque specs, there's no real way to torque the blade. I'm getting ready to put some gas in it and fire it up and test a few things out, but that's not for this video. This video is just to help those who have just received their mill or are planning to get their mill and they're making preparations to assemble it. Standard hand tools is all you need to assemble this mill. You know, my metric wrenches from a 13 up to a 19. I will say that there are a few bolts on this that are bigger than that 19, and that was the biggest metric wrench I had. But I had 15/16 standard wrenches that fit those, so I used those instead. Overall, there really is not anything too tricky or technical about assembling this mill. It all went just as planned, and I'm ready to throw a log on this thing and put it to work. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video about assembling the MechMaxx SM-26 Sawmill. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment. If I can help you out with your assembly, let me know. I'll do the best I can. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Listen, don't forget to get outside and enjoy God's creation. It's beautiful out there. Y'all have a good day.